Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Oh yes, it's the dulcet tones of Ethan Dettenmaier.
That's why everyone's going nuts.
That's why they all tune into this show.
Right, exactly.
They want to hear the detonator. Hey, that's a new nickname for you, the detonator.
I actually had that nickname
Did you?
in high school, and it wasn't meant as a compliment.
Okay, I want to hear this one.
Well, I mean, I think you could draw your own conclusions if they call you detonator.
In other words, you were like explosive?
You know, in all the right ways.
Oh, the detonator. In all the right ways. I you know what? I would want to expand upon that, but maybe do that off air.
I don't think it'd be very entertaining for the show. I've had some colorful nicknames in the past. Staff Sergeant Barnes being my favorite, but the detonator was good too.
Yeah, no, I like that. I didn't realize that it was it's funny because I guess the what is it, the normal ones you get called, based on who you are and what you do, people kind of tend to make up nicknames, and they kind of are the same. Everybody comes up with the same ones, pretty much.
What were some of yours?
Oh, God. Well, since my last name was Hewitt, it was Spewitt or Sketty for spaghetti. Because they used to call me that because being Italian, they go, and I'd be going, oh, hey, spaghetti. One of the things was I'd be called or Sketty. What else was I called?
Well, I have to actually
God was
point out that I expect more creativity out of the people around you than
I would have done too.
honesty.
Unfortunately, they were not that creative.
Yeah, apparently not.
Yeah, they were not that creative. It looks like they were, I don't know, rather limited in their creativity, in their creative side.
Right. Are we having an earthquake, or is someone running around the studio?
Well, what's really interesting is because Beverly's just tweeted us saying there's something wrong with the feed.
What do you mean?
I don't know. Another channel talking over us at the moment.
That should not be the case.
That should not be the case.
It could be her computer if she's listening.
Is anybody else getting that problem out there? Give us a quick tweet.
Hold on. I'm going to turn over to you, and I'll actually run a test in the tech booth.
Fabulous. All right, so this morning, if we are having a slight problem, we are again going on to education, and maybe our producer in another room or another place has actually got the radio on, and we have two feeds going on. But no, people are actually saying they're hearing us fine. So, Bev, turn the other radio off. Fixing America's public schools. Every morning in big cities, suburbs, and small towns across America, parents send their kids off to school. And actually, the funny thing is, Bev is saying they're talking about sharks.
It's Bev. Bev is.
I think it's Bev because somebody else said they're hearing us fine by the side. So
I just tested it out. The text looked at it, and I think Bev, who works very hard, should take a break.
Take a break. Yeah, I mean, she's talking, and they're talking about sharks. Maybe she's dreaming them.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. Well, anyway, I just talked about schools.
We do love Bev, though.
I love Bev. Yeah. She does so much stuff for the fund and for this radio show. So, God bless you, Bev. We were talking about a shocking number of students in the United States attending schools that have virtually no chance of learning. Failure factory is likely to produce dropouts than college graduates. And despite decades of well-intended reforms and huge sums of money spent on their platform, our public schools haven't improved markedly since the 1970s.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary. And by the time the No Child Left Behind Act, the NCLB, was passed in 2001, most Americans agreed that the public education system was broken, and many felt it was beyond repair. Most realized that the problem is worse in our underserved communities, less affluent, often located in the inner city, disproportionately populated by minority group members. But our middle and upper class communities are suffering as well. Now, interesting. These are facts. Middle-class school campuses look well-groomed. They got great athletics. They provide, other attractive features. But when you look at this structure, many of them and you examine the data on student performance, you often find that top-performing kids are dragging up the overall test scores, masking the mediocrity in which the bottom 75% are stuck. So in other words, you're talking about a lot of high-level kids are bringing that average up, whereas the 75% are actually stuck in a lower percentage rate. Now that's kind of scary. I didn't even think about that. No. Really, when you're looking at test scores, schools say, well, we're in the top, 25% of the country, but it might be only 3 or 4 of their students are actually bringing up their test scores. Some troubled neighborhoods, diamonds have emerged, and now I'm interested in finding out about diamonds. A new generation of reformers has proved change really is possible. Today, families are flocking to those few exemplary public schools, often competing in lotteries for admittance. Now, I know about this because...
Yeah, you're going through this.
Yeah, I know about this. There are some very good public schools, but only a small fraction of those kids will actually get in. In the case that we were in, it really depended on whether the child had certain abilities, but it was 600 applicants for 100 spots. And you got... other neighborhoods, families don't even have a lottery to pin their hopes on.
Did you get that settled in your case? Do we know what's happening?
Pretty close. Close. It's really dependent on a couple of things, but it looks like it's been sorted out.
Is there a way to hedge a lottery? I'm sure there is.
To do what? To hedge a lottery?
There is a way to
hedge a bet.
Sure.
Hedge a bet. Oh, I'm sure people come up with myriad of different ways of fixing it.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain factors whenever you do a lottery that you have to be in this percentile. You have to, and I'm sure lotteries have, from what I understood when the lottery was taking place, your information of your child is put into a computer, right, and it matches certain criteria that school is looking for. So, in other words, you don't know what that criteria necessarily is, but that computer's picking those numbers out. So the lottery is actually kind of fixed, in a sense, because they're looking for certain factors, whether you live in the district, whether you have certain grade levels, whether you have siblings at the school. Factors of that nature are actually, part of that lottery's choosing mechanism, if you like.
Right, okay.
Which is, anyway... Anyway. Well, you kind of go, okay, so how do you, I mean, is that fixed? Or is that just the school weeding out the ones that they really want to pull in? I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, I don't know whether that's fixed or not. Would you do that?
Would I fix a lottery?
No, I'm not saying fix a lottery. I mean, if you were doing a lottery, if you had 600 people and you had 100 spots there, would you actually say, okay, if I've got 600, I want to get the best applicants I can to put them into this program?
If there was a way to design lottery criteria around sort of focusing on whether or not the students were actually committed to being a part of the school structure, I would probably look in that area. Mm-hmm. What are the grades like of these kids that are applying for this lottery? Are they motivated? Do they care about school? Do they hate school? Do they ditch school? What's their attendance like? Right. Are they at school?
But when you're dealing with 5 and 6 year olds, because those things do apply to lotteries as well.
That's different. Yeah, you have to give special consideration to people who are going into kindergarten.
Because you don't have any track record really, except for maybe they've got preschool.
But if you're having a lottery for say 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, you want to see what they've done the previous 2 years. Do they have disciplinary issues?
So in other words, you are vetting the ones going in, even though it is a lottery. A lottery is supposed to be an even keel, isn't it?
I don't know that I would honestly do a lottery system, and I don't know that I would gamble like that. But if I put my life and all my artistic and educational passion into a school that I had built, I would certainly want to govern the kind of students we catered the service to. And it's got nothing to do with economics, poverty versus wealthy. It's got everything to do with whether or not the student wants to take the step of actually being a part of the program without being trouble for us.
Right. Right. There are some disturbing facts, actually. So, I mean, going back to the thing about, do you vet? I mean, obviously, there is a certain reason why schools do that, because they want the best result for their school. Because obviously, when they get better results, they get better funding. They get more people coming to the school. They get tuition fees and all those types of things. Among 34 developed countries in the world, the United States is ranked 27th in math and 20th in science.
I'm surprised it's so high.
Can you believe that?
I totally believe that.
Ranked 27th. 27th in math. That means most people can't count in this country. That's frightening.
Well,
27th out of the world's... come on, I mean, really?
When I was a kid, actually, if I may interject here, the city of Los Angeles spent several $1 million in the late 70s, early 80s to transfix all our crosswalk signs from don't walk and walk to the hand and the walking figure.
Gosh,
which told me that the solution wasn't to put money into education and teach people how to flipping read.
Yeah,
but we're going to spend millions of dollars dumbing it down for them. And that's the first sign of the educational apocalypse that I remember.
Well, you're talking about the 1970s. In the United States, produced 30% of the college graduates in 1970. Today, it produces 15%.
Yeah,
it's
tragic.
Dropped half of the college graduates in the world. I mean, in the US, 14% of the new teachers resign by the end of the first year, 33% leave within their first 3 years, and almost 50% leave by the fifth year. That means you have a constant flow of teachers going through school. So how does a child, connect? I mean, they're getting some good grade with a teacher, and suddenly the teacher changes. That changes their entire way of looking at things. I mean, we talked about how some schools actually have, when you go through a school, you're going to have one bad teacher, one teacher that is burnt out, and one, that happens. It's going to happen.
Right.
But to have that happen through that type of thing, 14% of the new teachers resign by the first year. What's wrong with that? I mean, how does that,
We should actually converse with teachers who have resigned and have them give their reasons.
Yeah,
I think I can guess what it is. But that would be weird.
Well, the scary thing is we are now in 2015. We have 5 years. In 5 years' time, the United States will have 123 million high-skilled jobs to fill, and fewer than 50 million Americans qualified to fill them.
That is a very interesting statistic. I'd like to know where that comes from, because it's optimistic that we would have 123 million jobs
that's what I'm looking
in
at.
5 years available, and with a workforce not equivalent to filling them. That's in a weird way is optimistic, but it tells you if the fact, and I have no reason to doubt the statistic, it tells you what kind of ground game we've got to start putting in place to get the
exactly.
Also, it tells you a little bit about our immigration policy.
Well, here you go. This is what happened in Europe. I mean, and in Europe, and it becomes problematic, because in Europe, what happened was that the amount of people. This is a general fact. The amount of people that you actually need to sustain a certain culture, I believe, is 2.3%. 2.3 children per couple. The a lot of countries in Europe are falling below that 2.3%. Basically, what that means is you think, well, what does that mean? That basically means that if you are only producing 1.9, 2.1, that means that you cannot reproduce the amount of people in your society to run your economy. So what do? You import. You bring people from other countries to fill your immigration. So therefore, you're talking about your immigration. It does affect your immigration eventually. And what does that do? Do those people integrate into your society, or do they create their own societies within their own religions, their own pockets? And that's another issue I always have, is that if you go into somebody's house, I'd like to try and be in the way people live.
You and I are quite alike on the courtesy standpoint, where immigration is and what our mentalities are as far as that kind of thing goes. And I think people tend to respond. They can form their own cultural cliques or become part of something great if you can sell them the idea of being something great. And that's one thing that America, quite frankly, to quote where my experience comes from, is not really doing. Mm-hmm. Right now, everything is a political disaster. It's a Stonewall system of nonsense. And I don't think people come here. They want to become. They come here for what the idea that America was and for jobs, but not because you're selling them on the fact that you can be a part of the greatest society on the planet, because it's obvious to everyone we're not that anymore.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, everybody still lives that dream. I mean,
we can be that, but we're not that right now.
Yeah, because you got to fix the problems first. You can't put a Band-Aid over them. You can't say, okay, well, it'll be all right. Don't worry about it. And I think sometimes the solution is that, well, and I think this happens to some politicians. I don't care. I'm not going to be alive by that point. Another 20 years' time, somebody that's 60 or 70 years old might go, well, I need quality of life for me and maybe my family, but I don't have kids.
And that is exactly, I agree with you, what happens. They put themselves first, they enrich themselves with lobbyists, and they don't really care about you or the school you're in a lottery in.
Correct. 66% of all U.S. fourth graders scored below proficient on the 2013 National Assessment of Education Progress reading test, meaning that they're not reading at grade level. About 22% of eighth graders scored below the basic level, and only 36% of eighth graders were at or above grade level.
Embarrassing.
36%.
Embarrassing. And this is the sign of the apocalypse that I know you get, that I don't think most listeners get, which we are now in a country. Can you tell me where the nearest factory is? Because there isn't one near you. There are no factories. Our whole economy stems from intellectual property and ideas. If we don't have anyone intelligent, we're doomed.
Correct, and that goes all the way back to what we've been discussing over the past couple of 2 or 3 weeks, is about all this technology that we're sticking in front of our kids rather than actually allowing them to read. They're looking at pictures, like you said, changing the crossword signs to a hand instead of saying "don't walk."
Right. It's basically saying you don't have to learn to read. We'll spend millions of dollars to dumb it down for you.
Do you know that 30 years ago, America was the leader in quantity and quality of high school diplomas?
I'm sure of it.
Today? Okay, what's the ranking today of the US in the world for high school diplomas? Any of you can tell me out there. Come on, tweet us now, and I'll bring that up. What level out of the world are they? 15th, 6th, 20th? What one? What do you think they are? What do you think we are? Since we've been discussing this, what position do you think the US today ranks in quantity and quality of high school diplomas? Okay, we'll get back to that in a second after you guys have tweeted us some of that information. Neighborhoods. What do you think? I mean, I've been dealing with this a lot, right, about neighborhoods, how housing prices are affected by the schools in a certain neighborhood.
Probably.
Yep. Well, I mean, that's definitely.
I happen to have an elementary school in my neighborhood, and I love it.
You love it, right?
I mean, that's to my school. It's the dream, and it's actually a school full of committed people,
right?
Which is the rarity. Do we have an answer on what our ranking is yet?
Well, I'm just looking at people are tweeting gradually, but let's leave it. I'm going to leave it for another 5-10 minutes. There's a slight delay.
Broadcast and the tweeters.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, I'll get them. I'll give it like 2 or 3 minutes because I just want to go into neighborhoods.
Back to neighborhood killing schools.
Yeah, let's talk about the neighborhoods killing schools. When students don't achieve in school, they lose interest, they fail to graduate, they become liabilities rather than assets to the community in which they live. You've got students that fail, that actually exceed the number of successful graduates in a community, and that basically means the culture becomes one of failure rather than success, and that sort of spirals down for the entire community. Mm-hmm. And that then causes people without jobs, which puts a strain on the community. Resources, you get domestic violence, drug abuse, vandalism, theft, crime goes up. There's so many different things that comes from the basic education and kids achieving or being successful in schools. It's our job as parents to really make sure that their kids are doing this. Sometimes I know that, I'm working, I'm doing stuff, and I get to the point where I'm like, oh, I've got to go and see my kid's school. Oh, do I really want to do that? And I have to force myself and go, yeah, I do. I have to go and do that. I have to see how she's doing or he's doing or whatever. Because if they're not doing what I would like them to do, I need to know it so I can change that. You have to be able to know that. Go to your kids, the meetings the kids have at school. You want to go and do that business deal. You want to go and do that. Yes, that does happen. Take an hour off school to go and talk to the teachers. You have to do that. It's important because if not, you might miss 2 or 3 years of your kids' schooling, and that could really damage them for the rest of their schooling life. Yeah. So anyway, I'm okay. Let's get back to this number. I want to talk this number again. I gave you guys a chance to tweet us. Some of you did, but today the United States is ranked 36th in the world in quantity and quality of high school diplomas.
And that's probably out of 36, I'm guessing.
36. Well, you're talking about, there are a lot of countries. There are, hundreds of countries in the world. But 36th. I'd be curious to see who's number one, actually. That would be kind of interesting.
Did they actually rank every country on the planet?
I believe they did. This will be a Beverly Shahara discussion. If she could tweet us now, we'll find out. That'd be kind of an interesting thing. Who is number one, and how many did they actually rank in the world?
Who is number one?
Well, that's what I'm going to find out.
I'm going to guess, actually, who would you think is number one? For some reason, I'm thinking Switzerland.
Interesting choice. I could even say Sweden. Or somebody like that. But we might be surprised.
Somebody
it could be somebody like Japan.
Japan's who I'd pick a decade ago. I'm tempted to say China.
You're talking about economy a decade ago. But you're also talking. You also have to talk about schooling. Economies come and go because of different factors. But the educational system. England has a very good educational system. England does. It's very good. Although I'd be interested to find out what they. I've just got the answer. Yeah, who's number one? We were very close. Finland.
That makes sense.
Finland has the highest. I said Sweden. I was very close. I knew it was going to be one of them.
Part of the reason for that is it's dark and you can't go outside most of the year. So what else are you going to do? Play
Scrabble.
Scrabble. You're going to do your homework. You're going to read. You're going to learn things.
Well, I don't know. I mean, is that your assessment of it?
Well, I have a friend who was the strongest man in the world twice. He's Finnish, and
he's finished.
He's Finnish.
Oh, he's Finnish. Okay, just checking.
He told you that you can't. You can't go outside most of the time. So
you
kind of find ways to occupy your time. I mean, I'm not saying that's the reason, but it probably helps.
Well, it probably helps to actually be able to do stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Where would Hawaii rank if it was its own country? And many Hawaiians want it to be its own country,
yeah,
by the way.
Well, they're part of the Maori population, and there's a very big movement. The new Maori is a country, actually. Did you know that? Maori is actually a country. It's a recognized country now.
Wait a minute. So,
which includes like the Tahiti, etc.
Well, so what do the French authorities think of that, being that they control Tahiti?
Well, they control it, but it doesn't mean that they're...
So can I put my hand up and say, look, I don't have to bow down to your French laws because I'm part of the Maori government?
Well, again, that Maori government...
Could you point on a map and actually say where that is? Is that like ISIS, where it's just kind of a fog of movement? It could be here.
You know what? I'm not certain about that.
Fascinating, though, that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it is, because I know, because there's a lot of business coming out of Maori right now.
And that's going to be very trendy. I think people are going to start to wall up, and we're going to see more racism than ever, because you can't belong to a certain government per se unless you belong to its race.
There you go. So I mean,
ugly.
That's going to be interesting.
Ugly bit of business.
I mean, it's all the South Pacific. The Maori country per se is part of the South. Anyway, let's get back to education.
That's a whole show.
This is an education. That is a whole show.
That's a whole other show.
But actually, it's John Beerley. I'll be kind of interested to find what his opinion is. He around?
Yes. Good morning, guys. I'm very froggy. I'll go ahead and warn you right now.
Is that because you've been shouting at the conventions that you were at last week?
Coming in from a galaxy far, far away.
That's right. That's right. There was lots of talking over the weekend, and then lots of sitting with people on the airplanes who are coughing with their mouths open. So I think it's a little bit of both.
I get something, I hate it when people, and I've had this before, when people, you walk up to them and they sneeze in their hand and they offer you their hand to shake. You really think I'm going to do that? Wrong.
I really want to talk to Beerley privately about how much money he spent at autographs at Star Wars Celebration. I want to know what his personal economy vested in the Star Wars franchise after this weekend, but I guess we can wait for a private conversation on that.
Yeah, I hated that I didn't get to meet up with you, Ethan.
My schedule, just so you know, I don't totally lack courtesy, was hyper tight, and I was really only there Thursday.
No doubt at all.
Oh, you went?
I went Thursday, to make an appearance, and I was supposed to get back over the 3 days, and I didn't get back there till Sunday evening.
Wow.
Actually, I've got commitments elsewhere that actually really prohibited me. So it wasn't like I was there and I blew you off, John. I wasn't there.
No, I totally understand. Believe me, I saw all of your posts on Facebook about the combat radio stuff going on, and I definitely understood that you were a very, very busy man. We will meet in person one of these days, for sure.
Plus, you don't need me, man, when you're hanging out with Luke Skywalker, as I think we've all seen. It's much better.
And Billy D. Williams and Carrie Fisher. I got to meet all kinds of great
Billy
people.
D's nice.
Lots of dreams come true, for sure.
Yeah, Billy D's a good man. I know him well. I've met him several times.
Funny combat radio story from him on being with us on the radio, but I'll save it for another
time.
Day.
Let's get back to education, guys, because this is what I want to talk about. We're talking about education. And neighbourhoods obviously are affected by schools that are failing. We talked about crime going up, and which basically means that you've got communities designated as high-risk investment zones, so financial institutions begin to refuse to write mortgages or make business loans. It's a total domino effect that happens here.
You're motioning to me like a...
Well, I thought you might want to, Anyway, doesn't matter. Over time, what may once have been a prosperous community becomes a ghetto, a place that there's no hope or prospects.
I find that hard to believe. I'm sure it's true, but
what happened to Detroit?
Well,
okay, let's talk about one of the cities, the most affluent cities in the U.S. many years ago, and now it's become very very poor in a lot of places, and it's become run down, etc.
Detroit is a wasteland in many ways, regrettably, because the people of Detroit deserve better than what they're getting.
Absolutely,
there is some infrastructure in place to improve Detroit, but I'm not qualified to discuss Detroit as an example for the situation we're talking about here.
Well, it'd be kind of interesting because we're talking about how financial institutions pull out of communities because of higher crime. And where does this come from? It comes from kids not being in school and then turning to drugs and crime and being put on detention and other things, where their lives spiral into that, and therefore the communities go down. They become vandalized, and theft goes up,
right.
Domestic violence goes up, and stuff like that, which stems from the schooling system.
Does that stem from the schooling system?
Of course it does, yes. Of course it does. It has to, because if you don't have kids in school, they have. What are they going to do elsewhere? They go outside, they join gangs, they get into drugs, they do things, and what that then leads to vandalism, theft, violence.
I'm sorry, I must be misinterpreting it. The schooling system. You're saying kids who avoid the schooling system or stay out of the schooling system?
Kids who fail in the schooling system.
Kids who fail out of it entirely or have...
Yeah, they fail.
Okay,
I mean,
that makes sense.
If their grades go down, if they fail, they're not interested in it. Therefore, they start... There's truism, absenteeism. They're not interested. They turn their attention to something else because their attention has to go to something.
I processed the situation a little differently. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll let you off. It basically feeds itself, and the old adage basically says success breeds success and failure breeds failure. It's evident in this particular case.
Well, what about accountability? What about putting accountability on trial?
That's a good point. Accountability. Who's accountable for that? When you have a job and you're earning very low wages during the week and you put your kids in school, you hope to God that the teachers are doing what they're supposed to do. But if they can't control the classes where kids are running rampant or not learning, how do you know that your kid's not then going to turn to something else? And you have no control over it. I know a lot of poor income families across the US have that issue.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do? I mean, again, this is a question for you guys out there. How do you solve it? Children who routinely experience violence or drug abuse, hunger, physical deprivation, in the absence of positive role models, begin school careers with 2 strikes. If the school simply reflects an already depressed environment, it becomes part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So it's our schooling system, and we talked about before. We talked last week. Take a stealth bomber that cost us, what was it, $70-something billion?
Yeah. Enough money to actually fix the educational system several times over.
Yeah.
Embarrassing.
I mean, why are we supporting that type of stuff? Why did we support that? John's gone quiet.
No,
No, it's staggering. It's staggering. You're right. It's $2 billion for one of those planes, and you think just take one. What you could do with just one influx of $2 billion into the educational system is just staggering.
Right.
It's not nearly enough, but it would be a start for sure.
Wasn't it more for what? No, the actual stealth bomber, I think, was actually more than that. I think it was.
We also talked about the Osprey program.
The Osprey program. That was the other one.
Which was basically a botched production job. It'd be interesting if there was a way to, turn education into more of a business, like the arms race. If there was a way to somehow make it rewarding financially, then
it is rewarding financially if the kids who are graduating are able to get good jobs and contribute back to the economy. We just need to. I don't know what the answers are.
Well,
you were talking earlier about teachers who teachers who are quitting in droves. I have so many friends who are teachers who are just absolutely miserable all the time, and it's not because they don't like the job. They love the job and they want to be able to do the job. But they're unable because there's so many bureaucratic obstacles and, just things that they feel like they just can't, that they're not doing good for the children because the system has so many obstacles in place. It's a real shame.
I want to also talk about how you test the kids in schools, because it's been quite a few years now that the US has used international tests as a yardstick to measure how well US students are measuring up in this 21st century, and the answer is not so well. It's because it's interesting that their what's the word, methods has been to deny diplomas to kids, firing teachers, closing schools. But this strategy really hasn't worked. And the scary thing is, here's the scary thing. The US performance on the program for International Student Assessment, which is PISA, declined in every subject area. And I'm going to repeat that. The US performance on the program for International Student Assessment declined in every subject area between 2000 and 2012. These are the years in which these policies were in effect. It's the federal policy of No Child Left Behind, NCLB, and the Department of Education's flexibility way. I mean, what is the solution? I mean, you're firing teachers instead of actually trying to educate teachers.
Well, we need incentives for teachers.
That's another thing. I don't think teachers get paid enough.
They don't, of course, and we need a better framework around them. We need to expand the number of teachers, quality teachers, and the number of classrooms, and probably reduce the number of students per class. And quite frankly, get the kids off of a sugar diet that makes them nuts to manage.
That is so true. I mean, the sugar is the worst thing.
That's a big part of the problem, I think, during the day.
My kid's so bad about that.
Yeah, we're going to have nachos for lunch and Coke. See you at 4.
Yeah, right. And then we'll let you off. I mean, seriously, my son, if he goes on sugar, if he eats any sugar, he's a nightmare for the next 2 hours.
I think that's most kids. I think they're an absolute nightmare at lunch.
And
the lunch sucks. The breakfast sucks, excuse my language, and the kids are just completely crazy. They can't focus.
Yes, and I agree with you, actually. Having less students, if you have 30 or 40 or 50 students in a classroom, how are you going to give individualized attention to some of the kids that need it?
You can't.
You can't. I mean, you really need 2 teachers per 20 kids.
Yeah, or even a couple of college TAs who can work with your lesson plan.
There are some guys that do that. They do college students that come in to assist the teacher.
Yeah.
So you have some sort of help.
Might be a good idea to start there.
Well, you were actually talking a minute ago about testing and accountability. Mm-hmm. I mean, some schools had goals for student progress that they were required to meet every year. And a failure to meet these goals resulted in punishments for the schools, depending on how long they failed to meet progress goals. The punishments ranged from allowing students to transfer to higher performing schools to implementing a restructure plan that could involve changes in staff and administration positions or an entire state takeover. Okay, is that the right thing to do? Is that the right thing to really penalise schools if their kids are not, they're not reaching these goals?
I don't know. That's such a dangerous possibility.
Well, education reforms run on moral justice, political, and test scores. And testing, from what I'm reading here, is the weakest leg of this stool. It's the most reliable means we have of evaluating performance, but it's unpopular. Nobody wants to do a test. I mean, the popular means are observations, portfolios, and authentic performance tasks. These are imprecise, squishy, and easily manipulated, and that's how it ends. I mean, I want to read something here a second. I'm going to get to you in a second, John, because I think education is...
No, this is really important. This is the Atlanta courtroom story?
Yes, I want to get to the Atlanta courtroom story. 11 educators convicted of criminal charges in a cheating scandal 2 weeks ago. 44 schools, 180 educators, 35 indictments. The ones convicted earlier this month face up to 20 years in prison. They were found guilty under the Racketeer Influenced and Corruption Organizations Act. Charges usually brought against mobsters and organized crime bosses. They were brought against elementary school teachers. They conspired to inflate achievement scores and in the process lied to students, parents and the public. After the scores came in, they received financial bonuses and national acclaim. We were talking about that, fixing a lottery. These guys fixed it permanently.
So, in this particular case, are we talking? What were the financial bonuses? What was the national acclaim that went with this? Do we know?
Well, they were claiming that their organisation. Again, I don't know the numbers on this and what scores came in. They got.
I'm looking it up.
As a taxpayer, if you want me to fund a 20-year sentence for a teacher for fixing their
well, there's the other thing.
This is very frustrating.
You're funding either the school or putting them in jail.
You're asking me to pay for the equivalent of a punishment that Al Capone would serve.
It's true, but
for lying.
What signals do you get that leads elementary school teachers to engage in organised and systematic misconduct?
Well, I would really like to examine the case closely. First of all, I'd like to know how much money was spent investigating this. And honestly, this is probably rampant. If it's happening in Atlanta, it's probably in every state in the union. But I'd like to know where this started, what signs started an investigation in the probe, what the whole thing is really about, because quite frankly, I don't think we really have...
Well, if you're touching it in one area, if it's just Atlanta, think of how many other places it's happening in.
It's happening everywhere, I'm sure. I mean, and
so basically, when you're looking at this is real simple. You're saying your kid got 75 on the test result. In actual fact, they only made 50. Right? You've botched that test score. Now what you're doing is, as they go further in life, if you continue to do that, you're basically dumbing them down. And when they go out there to actually talk about jobs and etc., you're having an unskilled labor force.
I agree with the obvious, that you shouldn't do that and you should work on getting everyone the best education you can give them. But we're talking about a 20-year sentence for this. So I want to know what they really got out of it cash-wise.
Right.
Because you're talking about putting a teacher away. I mean, this is, quite frankly... Is it a firing offense? Yeah. Is it a probationary offense? Sure. But these aren't dangerous people that deserve 20 years in a supermax.
It's interesting. The judge in it said this was not a victimless crime. He was referring to the children who basically received social promotions because educators falsified test scores. He says these stories are incredible. These kids can't read.
Well, that is definitely wrong.
I mean, you're like...
that is definitely wrong. But, I mean, there's kids who can't read in my kids' class. I don't want to put that teacher in prison.
Yeah, but where did that come from? Where did these teachers get that information from? From the superintendent, the principal?
We really have to dedicate a special show to this case and look at all these facts closely. And here's why. Because you're talking about... I want to know exactly what was received and exactly what specifically was done. This is an interesting story. And I think before we discuss it thoroughly, we should know the facts from start to finish on it. This is very frustrating, but this is also going to discourage people from the teaching trade.
Yeah,
if you see teachers doing 20 years because they said a student, to paraphrase what you said, got 75 when they got 50. Look, I'm not for that. I'm not supporting that. And I think teachers, of course, and most of them are like this, they got to get in there and they got to give them the best education they possibly can. And I think a lot of teachers do that. Well, I'm not in favor of this, but I'm also not in favor of giving them 20 years.
I know. We have to find out what this is. I mean, but it's basically a result of pressure that it was placed on them to meet high performance.
Could quite possibly be.
It's basically for themselves too, because if they're not producing the kids that have high performance and the students are not doing it, it's a reflection on their teaching methods.
A draconian template of having to deliver things statistically or forced to lie on things statistically because there's implementations in place that would force you into this situation is really flipping the switch on this. If you can't get teachers in there for the love of teaching and give them the right support and have compassion and passion for the arts and mathematics and things of that trade be the driving force, we're really doomed if we've got some sort of situation here in Atlanta where people feel compelled to completely exaggerate and lie on what's happening there and are giving stiff prison sentences for it. I think we're really turning to the dark side on this. There's got to be a way to probably examine this and remodel it.
You always have to have a scapegoat. The teachers are the ones that actually are pressured to do the stuff by other people, and those people are pressured by somebody else.
Right.
And it goes down the chain. Somebody has to be put on trial.
Probably
that's really
the
what it
governor
is.
Of the state.
Very possibly. So I mean, you really have to look at that. Where did that come from?
I agree.
John, let's hold this topic for a very very short because we're again running out of time. I need to bring the hero of the week in so that we can uplift this conversation a little bit.
Yes. Very quickly before we get to the hero, I wanted to let everybody out there listening know about a great new fundraising opportunity we have at the Peace Fund. Go to thepeacefund.org, and under the link for our Peace Fund blog, you will find a new link that says Help Support Peace Fund Radio, and you will find an opportunity to make a donation to the Peace Fund in exchange for having your photo on the Peace Fund Radio wall. And you can leave a message, you can make a donation, and also make a dedication where Ethan and Adrian will read your dedication on the air for donations of $250 or more. You can choose a particular radio show date to sponsor. You can do this for a loved one. You can do it for someone's birthday. You can do it for yourself.
I'll tell you what, I can't speak for Adrian, but I'll read whatever you want on the air. If you donate $250 to the Peace Fund, I'll call your boss, I'll call your in-laws, I'll call anyone, and I'll state your, the facts, your opinion, whatever you want. If you donate to the Peace Fund, you could basically just tell me what to do for a day.
See, who would not want that incredible
I might
opportunity?
do that myself.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, come on, $250.
Find it on our website at thepeacefund.org. And our hero of the week this week actually ties right into education. Our heroes are 17-year-old Julia Mogus and her 16-year-old sister Emma. Since they were only 10 and 9 years old, Julia and Emma have clocked thousands of hours of volunteer service in and around their hometown of Oakville, Ontario, in Canada. They grew up without a television in their home, got their entertainment and education instead from every book they could get their hands on. And through their volunteer work, they learned in 2011 that the Aboriginal children and teenagers of the 49 First Nation communities of the Anishinaabe Nation were lucky to see even one book in their entire lives, if any at all, due to a lack of funding for education and a seemingly insurmountable mountain of other social and economic inequalities. But of course, our longtime listeners know what the word insurmountable means to our heroes of the week. Absolutely nothing. So at first, Julia and Emma started saving their own money to buy as many books as they could to donate to the Aboriginal children in these communities near their own home. The girls were so deeply moved by the responses they received from children who now owned their own books for the first time in their lives that they wanted to do even more to help these children receive educations that could open up new opportunities and new avenues for the rest of their lives. So in June of 2012, when Julia was 14 years old and Emma was 13, they made their mission official by founding Books with No Bounds, which you can find at bookswithnobounds.com. Their mission statement reads, "The mission of Books with No Bounds is to provide Aboriginal children and teens living in remote communities with books donated by publishers, authors, schools, individuals, and organizations. Books with No Bounds organizes, catalogs, packs, and sends appropriate books to the Anishinaabe Aski nations so that Aboriginal children and teens are given critical building blocks for literary success. Books with No Bounds believes that every child deserves the opportunity to read and should have access to an enormous supply of books. By providing sorely needed reading material and other learning tools, Books with No Bounds refreshes the shelves of Aboriginal school libraries, community groups, and organizations, and ensures children and teens have access to good books regardless of where they live. We distribute books and other learning tools to students of all ages and strive to promote literacy, Aboriginal cultural sensitivity, and friendship, one book at a time." And they are getting it done. To date, the girls have collected, sorted, and distributed more than 78,000 books and other learning materials to the Aboriginal children in Canada and around the world, including Pakistan, the Philippines, Africa, and India. They also send the children letters and postcards to encourage them to keep on reading and to remind those children that they too can accomplish their own dreams. We would need a 4-hour episode just to list all of the awards and initiatives and other volunteer work that Julia and Emma have accomplished. So please check out their website at bookswithnobounds.com for more information about how they do what they do and how you can help, along with links to their Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube pages. Also, definitely check out their YouTube page, youtube.com/bookswithnobounds, to watch videos of their interactions with the Aboriginal children they assist. These girls do hands-on as much as they can, visiting the communities, talking to the kids, delivering books. It's amazing. Now, if their surname sounds familiar to our longtime listeners, it's because the girl's brother, Jack Mogus, was our hero of the week back on June 19th of 2013 for founding his own organization, Change by Youth, which capitalizes the YOU in youth because he wants you to ignite local and global change through volunteerism, leadership, and one of our favorite words around here, peace. Check Jack out at facebook.com/changebyouth to see some recent photos and new projects he's working on with his sisters, Julia and Emma. So congratulations, Julia and Emma, not only for keeping it in your own family as heroes of the week, but for joining the family of incredible kids we've talked about on the show who are making differences every day in the lives of children around the world.
I think it's amazing that you have the entire family doing, going out and creating their own.
Yeah, for sure.
Isn't that? It's so inspiring when you hear that. It's the entire family's doing it. What are you doing to make a change? You know what? I'm going to challenge everybody out there. One of the very simple things you can do every week, it's a simple thing. You don't have to go out and start your organization to make a change. You can do something very simple. And it came up to me this morning while I was letting a lady in with her 2 children at my preschool, at my kids' preschool. I opened the door, the kids looked at me, the lady said, let them go through first. We'll stand back. So I opened the door for the lady. The lady pushed the kids in and walked straight past me without saying thank you or anything. And I'm like, that was so simple for her to say thank you. So I'm going to challenge you this week. Say thank you at least once a day.
Yeah.
Once a day, say thank you. Thank you to somebody that's let you go past in a car. Say thank you to somebody that's opened the door. Say thank you to somebody that's given you something. Just do something simple. Thank you. And we're going to be doing that on the Peace Fund. We're going to be putting challenges. This is a simple one to start with, but eventually we're going to have a challenge on the Peace Fund Radio, Peace Fund site every week for you to look at, so you can come back and you can post the pictures of how you did it. This is a simple one. You don't need pictures for this one. This is a real simple way. Say thank you to somebody during the day. Okay. Now, I've got
and it takes a little. I'm a big fan of the courtesy wave. If somebody lets you in traffic, give them a wave, give them a thumbs up, let them know you let them know you're appreciative. So simple, so easy to do.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I did that this morning. I said thank you to somebody. It was traffic was terrible this morning, and I got irate with one car that would just cut right in front, so I cut in front of them and stopped them. But then after that, I said thank you to somebody. That there's a lady walking across the street, and I would have been blocked. And I said thank you, and she smiled like very nicely. And I was like, oh, that was really nice of her. It changed my morning when she replied to me for that thank you. It was a simple.
It's amazing the little things and what they will do to the rhythm of your day.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, it really does.
I remember actually driving here to this show. And I was driving through. I drive through a part of town that's not the best part of town, and a man was helping a woman with a stroller out of the apartment gate. You know how they're all gated up.
Yeah.
And he was really doing a nice thing, holding the gate up for her. And he looked like the type of guy you'd see outside of Home Depot waiting to jump in your truck for work. Clearly, a guy who was based on appearance didn't have a lot going on, but had enough sense and courtesy to do that. And I remember giving him the thumbs up, like he looked at me, and he gives me the thumbs up back. But it was kind of like the universal sign of like, hey, that was a cool thing you just did. It may seem small,
but it changed. But you remembered it, so obviously it's affected your space, isn't it?
I love that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan of that. Contrary to what people would tell you about my personality.
Well, let's just I want to give a quick shout out to a couple of organizations that are making a difference in education right now. The Alliance for Excellent Education, www.all4ed.org. Of course, all these sites will be on our Facebook and our pages very shortly, as well as our blog, which you can go to at the Peace Fund now. We have a new blog going on there. Excellent. The Alliance for Excellent Education. It's a Washington, D.C. based national policy and advocacy organization that works on it to improve national and federal policy so that all students can achieve at higher academic levels and graduate from high school ready for success in college, work, and citizenship in the 21st century. You can read more about them on that site. This is very important because when you go back and you'll see on our site, there is the link to the Atlanta schools scandal, why it happened, how it happened, and its policy needs to be changed because it started way back from the W. Bush policy. Now it's going through the current organization's, the current government's policy of more achievement, better achievement, and it's putting pressure where pressure doesn't need to be. Yes, there should be achievement, but there should also be some sort of support for that achievement to take place. Now, another organization, Donors Choose, www.donorschoose.org. Org, a United States-based non-profit organization that provides a way for people to donate directly to specific projects at public schools. The mission of Donors Choose is to improve public education by empowering every teacher to be a change maker and enabling any citizen to be a philanthropist. So check them out there. John, thank you for bringing us this week. We are run out of time again this week. Well, this subject matter is, I've only gone through half of this week's matter. We should have had 2 hours for this, but unfortunately we can't. We're out of luck. John, I will talk to you soon. Thank you for bringing us that.
My honor as always.
Ethan, thank you for that. Beverly, I hope you get your two your two radio stations sorted out this week. And in closing, a quote from John Ruskin. Let us reform our schools, and we shall find little need of reform in our prisons. This is Adrian Paul and Ethan Dettenmaier. We'll bring you education next week.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.